So we have Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So let's start with the Russian bounty story. We have confirmed reporting that the scheme for Russians to pay Taliban militants to kill U.S. soldiers actually occurred, that Trump received a written briefing on it in February, and that we even know the Afghan contractor who handed out the money. And meanwhile, Trump's position is just, nope, fake news. So how in the world does he reconcile that?
Well, I'm an intelligence person for 25 years. Actually, in modern times, the only person in the leadership to have that intelligence experience. And for us, force protection was the most important thing. You can't even entertain the thought of initiation of hostilities or engaging in them unless you know how you're going to protect your troops. It's of the highest priority to the intelligence community. And you would hope that it would have that same importance to the commander-in-chief.
Right.
So I'm not saying what was in his daily brief, but we all do know that the threat of such an action is pretty much in the public domain. And you would think that any threat to our troops would evoke the most immediate, relentless response from the President of the United States. What Chuck Schumer and I put out today says force protection is a primary purpose of the intelligence community. It should have the same importance to the commander-in-chief. Any reports of threats on our troops must be pursued relentlessly. These reports are coming to light in the context of the president being soft on Vladimir Putin when it comes to NATO and G7, Crimea, Ukraine, and the ongoing undermining of the integrity of our elections. Then we say our armed forces would be better served if President Trump spent more time reading his daily brief and less time planning military parades and defending relics of the Confederacy.
Right. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Either Trump didn't read his daily brief and that dereliction of duty put our soldiers' lives in immediate danger, or he did read it and he ignored it because he'd rather let our troops die than stand up to Vladimir Putin. And yet he has the audacity to go out and grandstand about how much he loves the military, you know? So have you heard from military members about their thoughts on this?
Well, I've heard from some of our veterans. Vote Vets, for example, has repeated some of the stuff I have been putting out. It's really quite sad because we always say when it comes to our military on the battlefield, we leave no person behind. And when they come home, we leave no veteran behind. And here we have a threat to our military that is ignored by the President of the United States without going into what would have been in the briefing to the president had he had the curiosity and the interest to listen to it.
I do want to mention too, you know, this is a guy who has attacked Gold Star families, who advocated for troops to commit war crimes, who insulted John McCain, a prisoner of war, for being a prisoner of war, who tried to invite the Taliban to Camp David on the weekend of 9/11. You know, the same Taliban who's now collecting cash payments from Moscow to kill our troops, a guy who forced West Point cadets to come back to New York, and then he saluted them, knowing that Moscow was paying Taliban militants to kill their fellow soldiers. You know, for him to call himself a friend to the military is just the height of hypocrisy.
Well, how about when he went there and they covered up the name of the John McCain ship, which actually was named for John McCain's father, the whole family, such patriots. No, he's an insecure person. As General Mattis said, he earned his spurs. Mattis, earned his spurs in the military. The president had bone spurs and didn't go into the military. This could even hurt him in his base because throughout our whole country is a great deal of patriotism. In his base, it's who they are.
Right.
And just watching, you know, as an observer and a strategist on all of this, the White House made a point with the press, and I said this to the press: you took the con. This president went out there and said there wasn't 100% consensus on this, so this is fake news and all that. That's not true. Many times we pursue intelligence without 100%. Well, most of the time you have to start someplace.
Right.
But they won that point because the press keeps asking me that question. Well, since everybody didn't agree. Well, yeah. And since everybody didn't agree, that doesn't negate that some people believe that this happened or could have happened. So that's one thing about the press falling for his act. The other part of it is to say it's fake news and a hoax. My gosh, coronavirus is a hoax. This story is a hoax. He is a hoax. He's a hoax.
Well, that's a good segue into coronavirus and healthcare. I think, Trump is in court now trying to dismantle the ACA as kind of a last-ditch effort to achieve the ultimate goal of his presidency, which is destroying Obama's legacy, right? And that's a legacy that you have a huge part in. You were instrumental in making sure the ACA got passed. Obamacare is at its most popular point in history, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. So trying to take healthcare away is insane. Is this just a gift to the Democrats ahead of this election? What's Trump's strategy here?
Well, I don't have to use the word strategy with him because I don't know that he thinks linearly or anything like that. And I don't just say this about Trump. I say this about many of the Republicans in Congress. They don't believe in science and they don't believe in governance. So why would they want to, on the basis of science, for example, do the right thing about the coronavirus? As I said today in one of my press things, it's one thing for him to be that bad, that they try to eliminate healthcare for over 20 million people, healthcare benefits of 150 million families, the primary benefit for people with pre-existing conditions, 130 million families. It's one thing that they don't believe in it. They're trying to overturn it, and we will fight them on that. But for them to lie about it and just say, oh, we support pre-existing condition benefit. No, they don't. They're in court to overturn it in the middle of an epidemic. They're
Right.
trying to take healthcare away instead of saying we want states to expand Medicaid, who haven't done it yet. So they don't believe in governance. So they don't want a government role in healthcare. They don't believe in science. So they don't want to invest in early intervention into any onslaught of illness. It's a mess.
And by the way, that's in direct contrast to what the American people want. You look at what happened in Oklahoma. No liberal bastion, right? In Oklahoma, they just voted to expand Medicaid.
Isn't that
So
great?
I think,
Isn't that
yeah,
great?
I mean, it goes to show that, the American people are on board with, the agenda that the Democrats are trying to pass, and that the Republicans' agenda is just flying in the face of that.
I wear this pin. You can't see it right now. It's a flag. And on it says, one country, one destiny. And this was what was sewn into Abraham Lincoln's coat that he wore. One country, one destiny. And that's what we are. So we get bogged down sometimes in talking about the lack of, shall we say, coherence on the part of the person occupying the White House at the moment. What we should be talking about is the flag, the pledge we take, liberty and justice for all. Liberty, freedom for people to do what they want, to be who they are, LGBTQ plus whatever. Women to have the right to choose in terms of their reproductive freedom. The list goes on and on. And justice. Justice is the central point of everything. Economic justice, justice in healthcare, environmental justice. Every subject that you can name comes back to justice in policing, justice in the courts, of course, but real, true justice. And that's where one country, one destiny can come together rather than, well, I don't believe in this or that. But yeah, do you believe in
Right.
justice? Do you believe in
Right.
justice? That has to be central and our standard for whatever we do.
So let's actually talk about, the Democratic agenda. If Biden is lucky enough to take the White House, I guess there's a bit of a worry among Democrats that we'll be more concerned with healing divisions than aggressively enacting our agenda. That we have to always be the ones to take the high road while Republicans stop at no lengths to achieve their goals. So what's going to be your position here if we are lucky enough to control all three branches of government?
I think that we have gone to a new place. We just are at a different place. You know why? Because people knew their power, the power of their turning out day in and day out, week in and week out, or over a month, all over the country, all over the world for justice. So I think we have to go into this with the confidence of they don't share our values. I mean, how can we compromise with them when we say no chokeholds? And they say, some chokeholds.
Right.
Well, we're going to compromise with a number of chokeholds. No chokeholds. No chokehold. I mean, I feel because I'm described as a left-wing San Francisco liberal. They had 137,000 ads describing me as such. I welcome that characterization. It didn't work for them in this last election. However, I do know you cannot negotiate with people who want nothing.
Right.
You're having a negotiation with your neighbor, your friend, about the size of the fence or the length of the grass. If they don't want anything, it's very, very hard to find common ground. That's why we're putting down our markers for our agenda: lower healthcare costs, lower the cost of prescription drugs, negotiating for lower prices with pharma, justice in policing, voting for the first time to make the District of Columbia a state. And then again with the infrastructure bill, the greenest, biggest package for infrastructure in the history of our country. Moscow Mitch, he said, she's spending all this money, taking all this money, calling it infrastructure, and she's spending on the climate change, he said. We call it crisis, he calls it. And I said, exactly. This is about infrastructure for the future, not
Right.
Infrastructure from the 50s.
I think
And
that's
that's
great.
a legacy. If I may,
Yeah.
that's the legacy of the Democratic Party. You know, people talk about Roosevelt and all the things he did, which were remarkable. And people say, well, you're talking about old programs. I said, I'm not talking about old programs. I'm talking about fresh thinking. His approach was persistent, bold experimentation. And that's where we have to go.
Speaking of, I think something that's going to pop up here is the filibuster in the Senate, the issue of the filibuster in the Senate. What's your position on whether the Senate should abolish the filibuster in the event that Democrats take the Senate?
Well, I don't get involved in their actions, and I don't want them to get involved in mine. But I will say this: I can't get over the fact that they will be approving 200 judges with 51 votes. They have gotten the advantage of no filibuster on those judges.
Right.
I would hope we would get the advantage on what we believe in, but we'll see. I mean, for example, when we did the Affordable Care Act in 2010, we did it under reconciliation, 51 votes.
Right.
And we are going to win the Senate. We're going to win the House, we're going to win the Senate, and we're going to win the White House. Civilization as we know it today depends on it. We must.
So speaking of Mitch McConnell, by the way, he's come out against abolishing the filibuster. You know, suddenly Mitch McConnell is urging against changing norms. What would your message to McConnell be on this subject?
Are we referencing Moscow Mitch? Is that what we're talking about?
That's who we're talking about. That's the guy.
Soon to be not the majority leader of the Senate. Is that the same person?
The same guy, yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to get involved in the Senate. Whatever the lead of the Senate Democrats is, that's what I will follow. But I will say this, that if there were shared values, you at least could find a path, but there aren't. That's why It's so important to win the election. We'll talk politics for a moment. We have to turn out our vote. You know that. That's a given. Let me talk to you about the House for a second. We are very excited about winning the House. We did before. Now we have to win it again. It's not as easy as people think for this reason. When we won 40 seats last time, 30 of them were in districts that were won by Donald Trump. They were close. He wasn't on the ballot. He will be on the ballot this time. So that makes it a steeper climb to hold those seats. But we have to be fortified with the resources to do so, and some of that means money. We have to be mobilizing, owning the ground, not yielding one grain of sand and turning out the vote and vote by mail. And we have to have a message that works in those districts, the boldest, most progressive message that works in those districts. And in those districts, we can help win the Electoral College and help win the U.S. Senate. We have some great candidates. Just this week, we've gotten Hillary Scholten in West Michigan, just fabulous candidate. Dana Balter, who is so fabulous, a grassroots activist. Dana Balter in New York. In Kansas, that we're winning in Kansas is so remarkable.
Yeah.
They're all tough districts, but we have great candidates. So not only do we want to win our 40 that we won before, but we want to add to that.
So you're maybe the only person who Trump doesn't know what to do with, from the infamous clap to shredding his speech at the State of the Union to the photo where you're standing up to him. Are these moments planned, or is it just luck that whenever you're in contact with the guy, his world comes crumbling down?
It's not luck. It's just spontaneity. I didn't go to the State of the Union to tear up his speech.
Right.
His pack of lies that he put out there. His disrespect for the Congress, the House of Representatives. His giving a Medal of Freedom to an anti-gay person, like, what's his name?
Rush Limbaugh.
Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
Prefer to put this was inevitable that I would do that. In terms of the meeting that we had at the White House, when I'm pointing to him as I leave, I'm saying, with you, Mr. President, all roads lead to Putin. And I say that to him today.
It seems to be a recurring theme in this presidency.
It does. Look at it. He questions our commitment to NATO. He wants to invite him back into the G7 when he's annexed Crimea, invaded Ukraine. He has undermined the integrity of our elections. He has yielded to him in Syria. What does Putin have on him politically, personally, financially, that he has to kowtow to him all the time? Yeah. And so we don't have a very good rapport. I can't wait. There's 125 more days. I just can't wait.
Yeah. I mean, this administration truly is, and especially Bill Barr, a living, breathing testament to, the attack on like you said, on justice. And I think it comes around full circle. And you couldn't have a more clear difference between what the Republican Party under Trump is doing and what the Democratic Party is trying to bring into the country.
I don't know what the Bar Association is doing if they're not investigating the ability of Barr to practice law. They should be kicking him right out. And some of our members, Kathleen Rice and Ted Lieu, for a year have had a letter to the Bar Association. George Washington Law School, where he went to school. Why are they just taking his picture down or whatever they have up for him?
Yeah. If they needed a kick, this might be it, right?
Let's see. One thing I have to say to you and to your viewers, go to speaker.gov/Heroes Act and see what the Heroes Act does. It's so remarkable. But when you look at it, one of the pillars is to honor our heroes, and you'll look up where you live, where you grew up, where you went to school, where you have friends, and see all the money that's going to the state and localities and counties in order to pay for their costs for coronavirus and their revenue lost because of the coronavirus. And when you see all that money, it's dazzling. And then remember this, it's only half of what it costs for them to give a tax cut in 2017, their tax scam, adding $2 trillion to the national debt, giving 83% of the benefits to the top 1%. And they complain about our helping our states, our heroes, our healthcare workers, teachers, sanitation workers, first responders, you name it, transportation, did I say? And they complain about somebody getting $600.
That's right.
Because they're out of work. Look at all that money and then realize it's only half of what they gave the high end.
Makes it crystal clear who's fighting for who, right?
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much, Brian.